Recording in progress.
Hello, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Francisco San Miguel, and I am the head of the Medical Physics Department at Hospital Central de la Defensa, Gómez Ulla. Our department is composed of 5 medical physicists and 4 technicians. We have 2 Electa Versa HD Linux operating in tandem with 6MV, 6MV without flattening filter, and 10MV energies. Additionally, we have radiosurgery cones, the Electa Active Breathing Control System for deep inspiration breath hold treatments, and the Clarity system for prostate treatment as well. We also use an SBRT system, which is applied for deep inspiration breath hold treatments also. And our treatment planning system for external radiotherapy is Monaco. And for record and verification purposes, we use Mosaic. Regarding treatments, we perform 3D conformal radiotherapy and VMAT using different fractionation protocols, SBRT in various locations, radiosurgery with and without stereotactic cones, and deep inspiration breath hold technique. Today, I will share our experience using the Delta4 Insight software. So, okay, let's start. What is Delta4 Insight? It's a software module for independent quality assurance of radiotherapy treatment plans, which recalculates the 3-dimensional dose distribution that a treatment planning system predicts using its own Monte Carlo dose engine. The primary function of the software is not to replace the TPS, but to check that the TPS dose calculations are correct under clinical conditions. Results can be compared to the TPS dose distributions and used to evaluate plan quality. It is important to mention that this comparison is mandatory in Spain. Besides, the system has some key features. It has, like I said, a Monte Carlo-based algorithm, which offers high calculation fidelity and modifiable accuracy and calculation time, and automated workflow, since the treatment plans are exported from the TPS via DICOM files, and Insight performs a 3D dose calculation automatically, and also includes dose volume, histogram comparison, gamma analysis, and pass-fail evaluation for targets and organs at risk based on clinical objectives and protocols. Additionally, it is integrated with the Delta4 software platform, so it is possible to manage secondary checks alongside other Delta4 quality assurance data in a unified interface. It has a flexible commissioning, since you can use golden data or your own, and generally speaking, the system is quite customizable. Let's focus now on the dose calculation engine. It is quite important to remember that the Monte Carlo algorithm is considered the gold standard method for accurate dose computation. There are several Monte Carlo-based algorithms available for radiation dose calculation, and inside the dose engine uses Jan4 to model particle interactions and transport in the medium. Jan4 is a general-purpose, high-fidelity toolkit for radiation transport simulation, originally developed for high energy physics and extensively validated in medical physics context. The Insight simulation model is shown in the image, and it comprises a virtual source model, a beam limiting device model consisting of jaws and multi-leaf collimator, and a target description defining the region where the dose distribution is collected. The virtual source model is employed to model the clinical beam and has three components: a primary photon source with a Gaussian distribution located directly below the LINAC target, a secondary scattered photon source with a Gaussian distribution located directly below the primary collimator, and a contamination electron source with a Gaussian distribution located below the flattening filter. Then, Insight directly simulates the particle interactions in the beam limiting devices in the beam line by instantiating the three-dimensional geometry of the physical objects, which include jaws and MLC leaves. It should be noted here that the interleaf leakage is modeled by separating the MLC leaves from each other, creating a small gap between them to allow the correct amount of leakage through. This interleaf leakage is modeled in the field center, so the accuracy of the leakage modeling will thus be highest in the field center and lower towards the edges of the field. In order to obtain the dose on the target, in contrast to some other photon Monte Carlo algorithms, the Insight algorithm relies on specific material definitions to model the patient, as opposed to a simplified electron density-based patient model. The dose calculator maps input Hounsfield units data to materials on a voxel by voxel basis. This mapping is based on a user-defined Hounsfield unit to mass density table specified in the Delta4 software. Using the mass density mapping obtained from the Hounsfield unit to mass density conversion, each voxel is mapped to one of the material in the materials list. The Insight Monte Carlo dose calculation was particularly relevant for us since we use the Monaco treatment planning system, which performed those calculations using a Monte Carlo algorithm based on a different computation. In addition, for these calculations, Monaco uses electron density rather than mass density as the primary input parameter for material assignment and dose computation. Regarding the commissioning, the system allows two different workflows. The first, simpler and more straightforward approach consists of using LINAC-specific golden beam data provided by Scandidos. This enables a rapid start of the verification process, but however, the main limitation is that any small dose discrepancies observed cannot be fully traced back to their origin. The second approach involves importing the beam data measurements obtained during the commissioning of our treatment planning system, thereby enabling the Scandidos Insight calculation model to be customized and accurately matched to the characteristics of our specific LINAC. Although some additional measurements may be required, most of the necessary beam data were already available in our department. Therefore, this was the approach adopted by us. Customizing the calculation model to match our specific Linux enables more precise beam modeling and provides greater confidence when assessing discrepancies with our treatment planning system. If this second option is selected, depth dose curves and off-axis profile should be submitted for a number of open square fields of clinically relevant field sizes, ranging from the smallest field size used clinically to the largest one. In our particular case, the largest and the smallest measured fields were 40 by 40 and 2 by 2 respectively. It is required also to define the dose given at a point of a specified source to surface distance and depth by 100 monitor unit for a 10 by 10 field, which usually is one gray at 10 centimeter depth for a source to surface distance of 100 centimeter. Besides, the output factors in water for all field sizes where profiles and depth doses have been submitted are also needed. In addition to the measured data, a number of treatment plans calculated with the TPS algorithm used clinically should be submitted, including open field plans for all of the field sizes where profiles and depth dose have been submitted, planned on a large water phantom with an SSD matching what was used when acquiring the data, and at least 5 clinical plans per beam energy and modality that can be considered typical for the clinical environment. It is important to remark that multiple isocenters in the same plan are not yet supported. Speaking of the CT calibration curve, to be able to convert the Hounsfield units of the CT images into density values and subsequently into materials, the Hounsfield unit to density calibration curve of the CT scanner used when creating the validation plans needs to be known. The calibration curve shall convert Hounsfield unit into mass density. The modeling of the different radiation beams is performed using the measurements acquired with the ionization chamber, and it is subsequently verified against the calculations from the treatment planning system. In our specific case, it is important to note that, as can be seen in the image, the penumbras are better modeled in Insight than in our treatment planning system when using the ionization chamber measurement as the reference. This is highly relevant because discrepancies in those may arise when comparing the treatment planning system with Insight, allowing us to better understand the origin of these differences. In our own experience, this discrepancy is not particularly significant in VMAT cases. However, in 3D conformal radiotherapy treatments, those differences can be observed at the field edges. Regarding the MLC modeling, it is important to emphasize that in Insight, only the interleaf transmission is modeled, and it is done in the field center. That means that the accuracy of the liquids modeling will thus be highest in the field center and lower towards the edges of the field. However, when the leaves are within the radiation field, many additional phenomena occur, such as, for example, the intraleaf transmission, the MLC offset, the leaf tip leakage, and the tone and groove effect. All these factors affect the radiation beam, and it is important to take them into account. In our specific case, Monaco TPS is capable of modeling all the phenomena described except for the tone and groove effect. This MLC modeling is optional in Monaco, and it is performed using radiation fields specifically designed to evaluate these parameters. In our specific case, we carried out this fine-tuning of the MLC using the Linux EPIT, which provides high resolution both spatially and dosimetrically, yielding very satisfactory results. For all these reasons, differences between the treatment planning system and Insight are expected in highly modulated plants. The greater the modulation, the larger the expected difference. Besides, since the treatment planning system has been thoroughly verified and validated through a large number of measurements, and a fine-tuning of the MLC behavior has been performed, the dose calculated by Monaco is considered our reference. In other words, if those discrepancies are observed, we generally regard the treatment planning system dose as the ground truth. Up to this point, we already have a general understanding of how the calculation engine works, and we will have our secondary calculation software model and ready to perform the first calculation. However, there are a series of parameters that need to be adjusted beforehand, and these are entirely at the user's discretion. The first of these involves choosing whether to report those in water or those in the medium. In my opinion, this choice depends on how your treatment planning system reports the dose. For example, in our specific case, since Monaco reports those in the medium, we also report those in the medium in Insight. The next parameter is the convergence threshold. With this criterion, in summary, the user can control the uncertainty in the calculation results. It is recommended that the convergence threshold is less than 1/3 of the max gamma dose deviation criteria. If this is not fulfilled, the gamma evaluation results may be unreliable. With the convergence voxels, the user defines a percentage of voxels in the convergence region to which the statistical uncertainty criteria shall apply. In performing this convergence check, voxels filled with air are ignored. It is important to emphasize that these convergence criteria are only applied to the CT structures defined as PDBs. In other words, the convergence criteria are not applied to the organs at risk. In our specific case, although this slightly increases the calculation time, we have selected the values shown on the screen because they provide calculation or certainty very similar to that of the original plan in Monaco, in our TPS. We consider it more appropriate and useful to compare two calculations performed with different Monte Carlo algorithms with a comparable level of calculation uncertainty. On the other hand, it is possible to customize the automatic evaluation parameters. In this tab, we can define the gamma criteria parameters, including the percentage of points meeting the criteria, the maximum dose deviation, the spatial deviation, and the dose range. Normalization can be either to the prescribed dose or to the maximum dose obtained in inside calculation. In our department, we always normalize to the prescribed dose, as we find that the other option makes the criteria too lenient. In addition to the gamma criterion, we also define the criteria we want to be met for the target. We can specify the percentage of the volume that should receive at least a minimum dose, as well as the allowed percentage of the maximum dose. Additionally, we can also define the homogeneity index. Regarding the organs at risk, the objectives are dependent on the fractionation scheme, and a list of organs at risk objectives will be automatically, this is important, automatically selected based on the number of planned fractions in the DCOM plan. These lists exist for treatments with 1, 3, 4, 5, and more than 15 fractions. If the number of planned fractions does not correspond to a list of organs at risk objectives, no such objectives will be evaluated, and the objectives are taken. No such objectives will be evaluated. These objectives are taken from the RTOG radiation dose constraints. Once all the calculation and analysis parameters were configured, we performed several validation tests before starting with actual patient treatments. All the preliminary tests were performed using a homogeneous plastic water phantom in which the density was overridden to water in order to start with the simplest possible geometry. In the first test, a 10 by 10 square field with 100 monitor units was planned for each of the clinically used energies in the treatment planning system. The plan was then transferred to Insight to evaluate the differences. The case for 6MV can be seen in the image, and as observed, the agreement between the treatment planning system and Insight calculation is quite good. The PDD fall off is exactly the same, and the gamma criterion result is 97.7% with 2% of the prescribed dose and 1 millimeter. The results were the same for the other two energies. Once the simplest case had been verified, the next test consisted of evaluating the dose differences for a 4-field box plan using again a homogeneous phantom with water equivalent density. It is important to emphasize that from now on, the treatment couch is included in both the treatment planning system calculation and in Insight. As observed, the agreement between the treatment planning system and Insight calculation is again quite good. The image shows the case for 6MV without a flattening filter, and the gamma criterion result is 98.8% with 2% of the prescribed dose and 1 millimeter in this case. The results were very similar for the other two energies. In the next test, the same geometry was maintained, but in this case, the plan consisted of a conformal dynamic arc. So we are complicating a bit more the plan. And although all the three clinically available energies in the department were evaluated, the image shows the case for 6MV. Once again, the agreement with the treatment planning system can be confirmed to be quite good, with a gamma criterion 2%, 1 millimeter result of 97.3%. As can be seen, the dose profiles are also quite similar. The last test performed before starting with a real patient was a prostate plan, again calculated using a homogeneous water equivalent phantom. The image shows the plan for 6MV, although this plan was evaluated for all three available energies with equally satisfactory results. As can be observed, the agreement with the treatment planning system is very good, with a gamma analysis result of 98.9% using 2% of the prescription dose and 1 millimeter criteria and a 50% dose threshold. With all these preliminary tests completed, we consider that we are ready to perform treatment calculations for real patients. So for the first real clinical case, a prostate treatment was selected, consisting of 70 gray delivered in 28 fractions. The plan was created using 6MV with a 360-degree VMAT arc for a total of 647 monitor units. As this is the standard in our routine clinical practice, real cases are analyzed using a gamma criterion of 2% of the prescription dose and 2 millimeter with a 50% dose threshold. In this case, the result was 97.8%. As can be observed in the dose volume histogram, there are slight dose discrepancies, but overall the results are very similar. The next patient analyzed was a head and neck case consisting of 60 gray delivered in 30 fractions. The plan was created using the two 360-degree VMAT arcs with a total of 651 monitor units. In this specific case, the geometry is slightly more complex as there are more bony structures close to the PTB as well as air cavities. As can be observed, the gamma criterion result was 98.1%, and once again, the dose volume histogram results are very similar. To evaluate a more complex scenario, a breast treatment was subsequently analyzed. This case was particularly challenging because it included the internal memory chain and regional lymph nodes. So it was a complicated plan. The prescribed dose was 40 gray, well, 40.05 gray in 15 fractions, and the plan was created using 6MV with two 108 degrees, 80 degrees, sorry, 180 degrees VMAT arcs for a total of 1,120 monitor units. So indeed, it is a very modulated plan in this case. The relatively high number of monitor units with respect to the prescribed dose suggest that this is, of course, a highly modulated plan. Well, using the 2% 2 mm gamma criterion again, the result was, in this case, just 95%. Moreover, although the dose volume histograms remain broadly similar, slightly larger discrepancies can be observed compared with the previous cases. The last case analyzed was a lung SBRT treatment consisting of 50 gray delivered in 5 fractions. This patient was planned using 6MV without a flattening filter with two 360-degree VMAT arcs for a total, in this case, of 2,471 monitor units. And as can be seen in the image, the agreement between the treatment planning system and Insight is very good, yielding a gamma criterion result with 2% 2 mm of 99.6%. And again, the calculated dose volume histograms are also very similar. Although this case is not particularly modulated, it is especially interesting because the treatment volume is located within the lung, which involves significant tissue air density changes throughout most of the calculated volume. So this case is quite interesting. So the main take-home message is that Insight has proven to be a robust and versatile dosimetric tool for patient-specific quality assurance in a wide range of radiotherapy treatments. It is a Monte Carlo-based dose calculation, providing a secondary independent check of treatment plans calculated by the TPS. This point was particularly important for us since our treatment planning system calculates dose to medium using a Monte Carlo algorithm. Given that Monte Carlo is considered the gold standard for dose calculation, having a second independent plan calculation also based on Monte Carlo, but using a completely different calculation engine, seems to us like an excellent approach for plan verification. Although some slight discrepancies are to be expected, of course, If two different Monte Carlo algorithms yield similar results, it increases confidence that the calculated dose is accurate. It has been demonstrated that Insight accurately models the dose for complex treatments, including VMAT, IMRT, and 3D conformal plans. Additionally, the system has been validated in heterogeneous geometries. The modeling of treatment beams can be performed using the ionization chamber measurements used for the TPS, and this allows the model to be adapted to the specific linacs in our department. Also, again, this is very important for us. Besides, although Insight does not perform fine modeling of the MLC behavior, it does model the interleaf transmission with good results, as we saw. As previously noted, this only produces noticeable discrepancy in highly modulated cases. On the other hand, depending on how our treatment planning system reports dose, we can choose to report dose in water or in medium. In the same way, we can set the calculation uncertainty to match the uncertainty of our TPS plan calculation. And finally, the system provides several analysis tools. First, it allows customization of the gamma analysis criteria through different parameters. And in addition, it also enables the comparison of both calculated dose volume histograms within the same view, supports the evaluation of the homogeneity index, and the target coverage and organs at risk metrics. With this final slide, our experience with the secondary calculation system Insight is summarized. So I hope you found it interesting, and thank you very much for your attention. Bye bye.